Podcasts are pretty common. So what makes the Uncommon podcast uncommon? Well, it's all in our name. I'm your host, Noah Weiss, and we at Uncommon Sports Group understand the unique pressures and temptations that come with a career in the sport industry. We provide uncommon training that helps you successfully navigate common challenges. Hit the follow button on this podcast. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Check out our website and become uncommon. What's going on, USG fam? Welcome back to another episode of the Uncommon Podcast. I'm excited to be in the podcast studio today with my brother and Minnesota Timberwolves video coordinator and player development assistant, Jonathan Mesmacque. Jonathan is originally from France and came to the States to play college hoops at Missouri Western State University before beginning his career with the Timberwolves back in September of 2021. Jonathan, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, brother. And Jonathan, certainly basketball has played a vital role in your life, but even more so, your Christian faith is an elemental part of who you are. I'd love for you to start the episode by sharing with us just a little bit about your faith story and how your relationship with Christ have shaped you as an individual and as a professional.
Yeah, so God's always been a huge part of my life. Grew up in church with my parents. They've been married for 30 years. We're a really close family. It's only three of us. I'm an only child. And so growing up in France, I used to just, go to church every Sunday. And it's always been a big part of my life because it was a part of my education with my parents. And then throughout, your life, you start having your own experiences, actually, and experiences who Christ is, what he does for you. I think, I left to come to the States in 2016. So I would say I was always a Christian. I always believed in God. I always thought that he was good, that he was there for me. But there was areas of my life that I kept to myself that I didn't really give to him entirely until really COVID. COVID was a blessing for me. I went home and so we were doing long distance with my girlfriend at the time, was my fiance now, and we started doing Bible studies together every day from a distance to kind of keep us connected. Yeah. And then throughout these days of just doing Bible studies together, kind of being stuck at the house, not being able to do anything. Yeah. How it says you read the Bible and the Bible reads you and just points out elements or parts in your life where you're maybe you should give me that or give me this. Yeah. And then so I really surrender one last, I would say, part of my life that I kept to myself and just give it all to him. And I just had that crazy breakthrough that one day. I'll never forget. It was May 8th, 2020, middle of the pandemic. Yeah. And things just really shifted from that point on with just having the awareness of just really what he did for me on the cross, what I mean? And so then just going forward, I just had a complete different perspective about things. And so that's kind of my journey with Christ. And then ever since then, it's just been amazing to just, walk everyday life hand in hand with him. And then now being with Kaylee, my fiance, and getting married in July and having had that walk together because she kind of came closer to Christ and we came to Christ kind of together. It's cool. It's my journey.
That's amazing, man. And I love what you shared too of you had this breakthrough moment of recognizing and having an awareness of who Christ was for you. And I think that's, because I have a similar story of growing up in the church and really not having a true understanding of the gospel until my 20s. And I think for a lot of our listeners, we come from backgrounds of Christian faith as a foundation, but we don't always come to understand what that really means, right? And I love your perspective of what the Bible did to you, right? Of being in the Word. I mean, I think that's, man, I reflect on my journey, and I think for the first 20 years of my life, I read the Bible maybe twice a year. There's such a small, minuscule amount that you're really in the Word. But when you dive in, I mean, God just really works in your heart. It's the Holy Spirit that does it. But I mean, man, that's such an incredible testimony. I think we can learn a lot from your story of there's that breakthrough moment when you recognize, man, this is really who Christ is for me. He's my Savior. He's my Lord. He's my friend, right? He's my guide. and he gives me his spirit. And so
Yeah,
it's an amazing testimony.
no, most definitely. Once you realize that, it just changes your perspective on a lot of things, and you really see a before and after in your life. Doesn't mean that you won't have any problems anymore. Doesn't mean that you're not gonna make another mistake or something like that. That's why people get like, they think, oh, you give your life to Christ for being a Christian means you have that perfect life and you're not gonna like do anything wrong again. And it's just like, no, like it's just the fact that you need him in order to like get to that perfection kind of through him, but you're always going to struggle like with certain things, and but you need him to make up for these struggles,
Absolutely, man. And I think many people would look at you as, you're working for the Timberwolves, you got it all figured out, but there's still struggles, right? And it's still a challenge.
Absolutely. So. And it's the biggest thing too for people to understand, whether it's just like faith-based or even kind of achievement based in general. Right. Like people look at the industry that I work in with the NBA players, like from an outside perspective, you could think they have it all figured out, right? Like they got their cars, they got their houses, they got like they're good. And so like people can think, oh wow, like I like their journey better than I like mine, but little do you know, like they have the same problems every day. I'm with these guys every day and they have problems, and sometimes they even have more problems because they have to think of things that regular people don't have to think about, as far as just being exposed to just like being able to go like, get your groceries yourself, or just do little things, or not have to like handle kind of like knowing what friends love you for who you are, or for your career, like just all these things you don't think about it, but everybody go through things, and it's just like on the surface level it might not seem like it, but trust me, everybody go through things.
Amen. Yeah, it is so true. And I think the reality of working in sports is we get to have this support system of teammates. Right? I think that's what many people love about working in this industry is it's not like other industries, right? We have teammates, we have relationships, we have players we get to be around, and I think that environment does bring about a foundation of trust and having people in your circle to help you with those struggles as well. But, Jonathan, I do want to transition as well to, for you, right? You knew basketball was where you wanted to be, right? You knew basketball was your career path. And I think for young people that are listening to this podcast, it's difficult for them to know, like, man, what part of sports do I want to work in? Is it basketball? Is it marketing? Is it, working in soccer, MLS? Like, what's really for me? And so how did you know that basketball was the career path you wanted to pursue long term?
Yeah, I think for me, it happened kind of late. I was going to graduate. I had my last game at Missouri Western, and so I'm sitting here like, okay, what am I going to do now? Like, basketball's been a huge part of my life, my entire life, and you kind of hit that wall of like, wow, like that reality, I'm going to have to figure out something now, make a living and everything. And so for me, the big part was I really thought that I was just going to use my degree and go work like a regular job in the corporate world. And so I started just pursuing this career in like mainly consulting, just because I like, like advising, coming as like a problem solver. So I was like, yeah, maybe I like that. And I ended up realizing that it wasn't necessarily going to be for me. And I felt like God didn't open the doors like after a while. And so I was like, you know what, I might think about just something else. I love sports. I love basketball. Why not try and pursue a career in that? Maybe, coaching or at least staying in the industry so that I just have that around, because that's what I'm good at. That's what I love. And that's kind of like what I feel I'm called to do. And so I went up to my head coach at the time, Will Martin, and he had a lot of great relationships with a lot of people that are in the league today, because he was a manager at Kentucky. So he's seen like a lot of coaches and a lot of players that are now in the NBA. And so I went up to him one day and I was like, hey, like, I want to work in the NBA. Like, I would love to give it a try and just see how it is in this industry. And that's what I want to do. So will you help me out? Can we figure out something? And he was just super happy for me. And right away, just kind of like activated all his relationships and was really trying to help me out for that. And so I ended up at first working in equipment, which I think we'll get to at some point later, but then now in video. But he just connected me with the right people. And it was a great journey for me, and it was a great part of my journey, that trying to figure out a career within the NBA and talk to people, because I've met so many people throughout that moment that were willing to help me, and that I didn't even know. Like I would go up to them and I would ask for, either advices or even like a moment with them to just connect and like ask them questions, being curious. And I've just come across so many people that were willing to help me, and it would just went straight to my heart right away, because every time I would approach them, I would be like, hey, like, it would be cool if you would, but I wouldn't be mad at you if you don't, because you don't even know me. You don't really have, a reason. And so I've just met so many people really just like selfless and kind of like an open book about a lot. And it encouraged me to then once now, like people reach out to me, to for help, I always try and make time, no matter how busy I am, because I was in their shoes, and it meant so much to me that they had time for me, so I want to have time for others too. So it was a great learning and very humbling experience at that moment, for sure.
Yeah, I love what you shared, Jonathan, of, you know, you searched for other positions, you know, whether it be corporate or what was open at that time, and you felt that basketball was your passion. And I think for so many, we have a passion for sports. That's why I be working it, right? It's not glamorous. There's long hours. There's hard days. It's not easy to get into it. There's not a lot of money in it. It's hard. But the reality of why we're in sports is because we love the game, right? And I think that's what I loved hearing from you. And even on top of that, of, you know, how you went about it, I think was so inspiring. Of, you go and you approach somebody you trusted, right? Your basketball coach, and you asked him for relationships, and that spread to other relationships that ended up giving you the opportunity to work in the NBA, right? That's an amazing journey. And I think for our listeners, you know, so often we're afraid to ask the question, like, hey, well, can you help me, right? But I think what we can learn from your story is that is a tremendous way to go about getting into this industry. And it's one of the most, I think, successful ways to do it, right? Because we're taking relationships that we already have, that people who love us and care about us, and they're going to help us get to that spot where we want to be.
For sure. So, it's a very dangerous spot to be into, to just like be scared to fail or be scared of like rejection. Like a lot of people won't go up to other people and be like, hey, like, my name is, here's what I want to do. I know you do that. I know you've been there before. What advice do you have? Or here's what I want to do. What's the best thing I can do in the current position that I'm in? And the worst thing that can happen is just someone just, you know, like moving on, not even replying to you or saying, no, I don't have anything for you. But you really don't have anything to lose at all. You have everything to win. Like if the person just goes along, then like you just try again. And it's just like people are just so afraid, or like maybe ashamed at some point, or they didn't reply to me. What are they going to think? It's like, who cares? Just try. Like if you really want it, if you want it bad, just try. And it's going to be a learning experience no matter what. Absolutely. And that's so true as well. I think it's a fear factor of, you know, hey, what if they say no, or what if they aren't willing to help? And it's like, you know, you'd have to take a risk. You know, it's all about stepping up and honestly, to what you said, if people ask you for help, you're willing to do that because you needed help along your journey. And I think most people in this industry are more than willing to step up and give you advice or help you network. So. For sure. Because what you got to think too is these people, they were in your position before. So more than likely they did what you're doing before, and they know that it requires courage to go up to someone that you don't know and introduce yourself and kind of like sell yourself. So to a certain extent, you got to expect like people are going to respect that. And then what they do with it, it's up to them. But it's always going to be a learning experience, whether you get more information, good tips for someone that doesn't even reply to you. You learn in that process. So how could I have approached them better to like, you know, have like information or whatever. It's just always you have to be like strategic about it and very patient, because it's not going to be the first door that you knock at that's just going to be the perfect result. But no matter what, it's just such a learning experience, and it's something you can even relate to faith, because during all that process, you have to be very patient and faithful, and you have to, you know, most of the time when we're in that, as Christians, when we're in that season, we're praying really hard because you're hoping to see something happening. So it's also testing your faith. So on just so many levels, it's a learning experience, and it's just a shame to just not try, you know? Yeah, that's so true. And I love what you said about, you know, it's a season where we get to trust God more, right? And be in prayer and just lean on him for guidance. I think that's that's the best part about the Christian life, is when we're in those seasons of, you know, hey, I don't have a job, or I'm seeking a job, is we have a God who wants to help us along that journey and give us guidance and clarity on what's next, right? And I think that's truly an awesome part of following the Lord is we have someone to go to in those hard times. So it's very well said, Jonathan. And Jonathan, one thing many of our listeners don't know about you is that you started your career in basketball as an assistant equipment manager with the Timberwolves back in your first year with the team. And obviously now you're on the player development and video side. But I'd love to hear, I think many young people would be hesitant to take a job that they don't really want to do long term, right? Maybe it's like, I want to coach. I don't really want to be in equipment, so that's not for me. But why did you decide to step into that role of being an equipment manager, even though it wasn't your long-term career goal? Then what can our listeners learn from that decision? Well, for me, the biggest thing was just to kind of find a way to get into the industry when I first got out of school, because I knew that I wanted to work in the NBA, and I knew it's the environment I want to be around. But I also knew that getting a job right away on the coaching staff as like a video coordinator or player development, although I would have loved that, would seem kind of like unreal. Like there's probably steps before that. And so what ended up happening is, just it's crazy when you look back at it, how like God's timing always perfect. I just went up to my coach, like I said earlier, and I was like, hey, here's what I want to do. I would like to work in the NBA. And he's like, yeah, I'll do whatever I can to just help you out. And so he called Peter, who was still the head equipment manager for the Timberwolves, because they had worked together at Kentucky.
Oh, wow.
And Will mentioned me, and he said, hey, I have one of my seniors here. He's really trying to go into the NBA, and he's willing to just pretty much do whatever job as long as he's around the league and in the industry to kind of figure out what he wants to do next, because that's one of the biggest things too. Once you're a step in, and once you're in, you get to see what everybody does, and then you have like a better judgment on like, oh, I would like to do this, or I would like to do that. Like I had no idea how like structured or how it was within an NBA team, so it was hard for me to be like, I want to exactly do that. I was like, I want to get there first, see it for myself, and then figure it out. And so when he said that to Peter, Peter said, yeah, I have my assistant that just accepted a head equipment job on another franchise, so I actually need an assistant. And so Will right away was like, oh my gosh, like that's your guy right here, like come on, just like give him a chance. And so he was on him about it. And so then I went up to Summer League and met with Peter. We bonded really well, and he ended up hiring me. And so that's the main thing for me. It was just, and Will, I remember his call too, just calling me, being like, hey, like, there's something that might be lining up, but just so you know, it might not necessarily be what you want to do as a career, but it would be an unbelievable way to just really like step into the industry and really like being in the core of that. Because one thing about equipment is like, you get to build genuine relationships with everybody, because everybody needs equipment. Staff needs equipment. Players, more than anything, needs equipment. And so you have access to different places within an NBA organization that are like pretty sacred, like the locker room for guys. Yeah. So you have to build that trust, build that confidence, but you also have the kind of like the honor and the privilege to know who the players really are as themselves. Like in the locker room, they're themselves. Like they might pretend being something on the court or in front of the cameras or in the weight room, but you get their true selves in the locker room. And so it's just like so many things like that when I first came in as equipment, I was able to just like see the true color of a lot of things and get the genuine of like what it was, the genuineness. And so it helped me figuring out what was my next step going to be. And so it was the key of just accepting that role at first. And I think something too that was huge for me in that season is how humbling equipment is. And you know that more than anybody too, just totally. It's very humbling. You're constantly serving. You're serving people from when you get to work to when you leave, and which is the entire day, because your days are really, really long. Totally. And you do laundry, you pick up dirty laundry, dirty towels. Like you just, it's just what you do. And I learned how to just take pride in that and doing it with a great heart, and just even appreciate and like taking that as a privilege to be like, hey, like I'm gonna serve these guys, and I'm just gonna do the best job I can. And it was, and people see it after a while, they see like your attitude, they see you do well and not complain, and just like embracing that, because they know it's a grind. Like everybody knows in equipment, and like in the NFL and the MLB and the NBA, I don't care, equipment is a grind. And so it was a great opportunity to show how hardworking and how much of like a grinder I was. Like it was super easy, just like work hard in equipment, and people will know, this guy works hard. Yeah. And so it ended up working perfect, and I learned a lot. So it was cool.
I love that story, Jonathan. And I think too, what is so amazing about that testimony is it takes a lot of humility, right? It takes humility to say, whoa, like I want to be a coach. I'm not going to do equipment. That's not for me, right?
For sure.
And that's a grind, right? And everybody knows, like you said, equipment is a grind. And often that's like a turnoff to going into equipment, is because it is such a grind. But I think to your story, what happened is every single day you were in the organization. And so every staff member saw you, they knew you, they interacted with you. You almost were putting on an interview every single day.
Right?
For
the
position you have now, right? And so, for our listeners, it's like you may not want that job, right? It may be something that you're a little scared to step into, but it may be the catalyst to get you to where you want to go. And that's exactly what happened in your situation.
Yeah,
really
and it's something too where you can just relate it to faith and to Christ. Like for me, it's a season where I was just praying a lot, and it's just like compared to the corporate business regular world that I was kind of like chasing or wanting to go into, or the doors weren't opening. That door for equipment for Timberwolves, just stuff kept lining up. Like the right people were coming. Like it was just guided, and so. Sometimes, you know, when things are guided and doors keep opening and like God is like pushing you a certain way, even though it's not necessarily the exact way you want to go, like you kind of like need to submit and like go to that, because then later on he'll honor that like 100%. And that's what happened for me later on, like a year later. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty cool to see. And I love what you said too about serving. And, you know, I think any sport industry job, and to some extent, is service to a team in an organizational goal. But, you know, I think even more so in equipment, you had to serve a lot, and I saw that firsthand of just the amount of hours you put in and the effort. But I think that is representing Christ, right? People see the more effort you put into it, the more time you put into it, they're going to see that is a reflection of your belief system, and it honors God. So I think that's another cool part of it too.
Yeah, and it trains you for other things too. Like, I mean, in video now, like, it might not seem as much of a grind because it's not literal grind as far as like just like picking up towels or doing laundry or like staying super late like on the job. But like the grind on the video side might be you freaking watching film until 2 a.m. every day, or like being the first in the office to do some things. And it's just like being in equipment taught me that grind early, so that once I have to grind in something that I actually like love that directly has to do with basketball later on, I'm ready for it and I'm enjoying it even more. But I mean, any high level sports position, like equipment, coaching, like no matter what you do, it's a huge grind, especially in major leagues. Like it doesn't matter what you do.
That's so true. And I think that's honestly a good testimony just to prepare our listeners for what to expect at that level. It's a grind. It's definitely a grind.
You have to know that it's really, really what you want. And I have a lot of people that, you know, they have hard eyes when you tell them that you do that. And in my head, I'm like, I don't know if you would have these hard eyes if you actually knew like what a day was like, or like a week or a month or a year or a whole season was like. And it's just something that you have to be ready for. Like just these long hours, you're going to have to sacrifice a whole lot, like personal life. You have to know. But if it's really what you want to do, then you'll be willing to put the work in and sacrifice for sure.
Absolutely, Jonathan. And I'm sure it's difficult, even talking about the NBA and you being a part of that. I'm sure it's difficult to be a Christian working in that space. There's so many unique challenges that people face in this industry, but especially as a Christian. So share with us, what challenges have you had to face as a follower of Jesus during your time in the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an industry where like you wouldn't necessarily think of Christ right away when you see like NBA or NFL or MLB, because it has a lot of like temptations of things that don't necessarily align with Christ. It's a lot of money, like popularity, what people think, like being viewed as like the king of the world from like an earthly perspective. Like a lot of people kind of roll like that. Yep. But for me, just something that helped me just really like staying the course is just realizing and having the humility to just realize that like he's the one that got me here, you know. So I couldn't, now that I'm here, I'm not just gonna try and like turn around or bow to certain things that I used not to. Like when I was hoping to get all these things, I wanted to align with like what he stood for and what he wanted for my life, because I wanted to get there. So now it would be like so what's the word, like like fake now that I'm here to just turn around and be I got what I wanted, so now I'm just gonna do my own thing. So it's just something that's pretty common sense to me, like, and I don't know, just like trying following him has been just good till now. So like why would I stop doing that now? You know what I mean? Like everything like it's been like working out like so well, and I know that it's all like through him and thanks to him. So it just makes sense to just like stay the course. Like it's the least I can do, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love that, Jonathan. And I think what you said really resonated with me of, you know, God is the one that has guided you along this journey. He's the one that's honestly led you to be a part of this organization and to have the influence you have. And so why would you turn on that now? And I think to really reflect as a believer, like, God is not a genie in a bottle, right? He's not just giving us our wishes. That's not his purpose, right? Yeah. It's a relationship with the creator of all things. And I think when we look at it from that perspective, it doesn't matter whether you're the lowest of the low, right, of working the toughest job in the industry, or whether you're the head coach, right?
Yep.
You get to serve God in either position, and regardless of what platform you have. And so I think, to your point, right, God has gotten you here. It's been an amazing journey. I'm going to keep doing that despite the fact that there are these temptations and challenges. And I think that's really encouraging for our listeners.
Yeah. And another thing too that's like encouraged me even more is just knowing that like I believe that he put me in that position strategically, knowing that the industry that I'm in needs like me, and like I'm putting that in quotes,
Right.
like needs me because needs like God's light in it. So it's like he's very intentional in like putting just like Christians in this type of environment to just be a light and just like show, just like love people, like be an energy giver every day, and just like serve and act with love to like whoever it is, whether it's just like the janitor or the head coach or the franchise player, or no matter what, like this type of stuff, it's just the reason why it happens the way it happens. And so when you look 100%. At it from that perspective, you just stay the course. It's just, I don't know, it's just natural to me, honestly.
Absolutely. And actually, I want to talk more about that, Jonathan. Is I think the flip side of it being challenging, what the NBA does offer you is a tremendous mission field, right, of people that don't believe in God, or don't have a relationship with God. And so how do you go about just sharing your belief system, sharing Christ with others?
I think like it just comes up pretty naturally, just because of the way you move, right? It's just like,
I love that.
You don't have to go out there and like write "I'm a Christian" on my forehead and be like, hey, like, grab a Bible and like just start slapping someone in the face with it. Like, it's just by the way you move at some point, like people most of the time just like notice certain things. And so it gives you opportunities to just kind of open up and mention, your testimony, what you stand for, like what you believe in. And for me, it's been the biggest thing. Yeah. Whether it's just with players or whether it's just with staff members at some point, just, like stick to moving a certain way, behaving a certain way. And it's one thing too about, all these major league industries, like we're around each other so much that the true colors come out very quickly. And so like there's just so many opportunities to behave a certain way for people to see that it's just going to encourage naturally certain conversations. So it's just, you don't even have to like want to bring it up or be strategic about it. Like by the way you move at some point, like people going to know, like people talk about each other. Like it's just, it just happens that way. So for me, I think the biggest thing's been, it's been my doing and like in how I am. And I'm not perfect by any means, but I just try and like act with love with everybody, just like cheering on everybody, like be the high spirit and just, wanting to see other people succeed and just love your neighbor mentality, like no matter what it is, if it's like a player or a coach, no matter what. And I think just people see it, and then it's just like little things like I don't know, like for example, like not cussing, right? And so like I'm in an industry where like cussing is a big thing. So like the fact that like I don't cuss, like people might notice that. Just like I said, it's just like little behaviors or things that you will have that people will notice, and then it's gonna encourage the conversation. That's but amazing. I'll encourage everybody, like no matter where you're at or whatever, like if you want to touch someone's heart or if you want to have a certain conversation, just like behave a certain way and over and over and over again, and then it'll come up. But usually when you try and force it, and when you're trying to, especially for me, like, I mean, I'm a video coordinator. I'm like surrounded by like, higher level, like within like the hierarchy of a team, like staff members that I've been for a long time. I'm around like players every day. There are millionaires that have millions of followers. So like the right approach for me is not to like come up and start like lecturing them. Right. Right. So it's like, I'm not going to go up to a player and be like, hey man, like you shouldn't do this, because I'm like, no, it's just, just be the way you are, and at some point the conversation is going to come up.
Man, I love that so much. And I think the reality is our actions always speak louder than our words. And I think that's the amazing part of following Jesus is we can show who God is based on how we live, and he wants to work through us in that. And I'm so encouraged by you, Jonathan, of just the way you have chosen to live in this industry. And I think the more that we do that as believers, right, the more people are going to be able to see Christ. And so I'm with you 100%. And I even think about Jesus, right? And you think about John 13 when he washes the feet of his disciples and he says, go do the same to others, right? Yeah. He encourages them to serve, right? He's not giving them like a 10-step plan to share the gospel. He's telling them to go serve. And through that, people are going to understand who Jesus was and really the good news of what he's done for us. And
yeah, for sure. And along with that, I would say like it's just like like love people no matter what, and just especially because we're in an industry like just in general, but especially in sports where you can get caught up so fast on just wins and losses and championships and down season people getting fired and so when you have that ability to just kind of like stay consistent with who you are no matter what happens around, usually people notice that because we live in a world where people just mood and behavior is like are like vary so much based on the circumstances. But for us as believers, like since we focus on different things, like our behavior overall should be a little more consistent, and it should be like a great way to show your faith and your beliefs, because whether we won 20 straight or lost 20 straight, like you come into work like joyful like the same way. And I'm not saying I'm always doing that perfectly. Obviously we humans, it's hard, but like overall, when you sustain that level of just being able to focus on different things, on things of above, like people see that too, and they're like, wow, like he's never down like that, or he's never like, and so it gives you great opportunities to and it's kind of like being, and to me it's like a big thing of it relates with just being loved to other people, like in like 1 Corinthians 13 with like definition of love, they say like keep record of no right, no wrong. It's the same thing, like wins, losses, right, wrong, just like stay consistent with it, and like love people, serve people the same way, and focus on the right things. So I think it's a great way to just have people be like, wow, like he's just the same, like I kind of want that. Like I don't want to be moody like that. Like, I don't want to be down or too up or too down. Just like be still, you know. So
that's so good, Jonathan. And you know, it's really beautiful to see. I mean, it's awesome. You and Moses Iambi, another coach on staff, is another believer. And we were just talking about you know, him and Nikhil Alexander-Walker, a player that just got traded to, you know, on your guys' team. And I've noticed the past few games that they're praying together before every workout, and it's just things like that that really show others, you know, who Christ is and really the amazing things he can do in our lives. And so I'm with you. I think the actions portion of our journey is a huge testament to Christ.
Yeah, it's the biggest one for sure.
It's well said, Jonathan. And you know, I want to jump back into more of a professional question here, but you know, oftentimes I think young people can look at you, right? You know, you're a video coordinator, you're doing player development with NBA players, and they can think, I could never do that. I don't have the skills to coach or help NBA players develop, so I could never reach where Jonathan's at. And so I just want to ask you of how have you been able to have confidence in the work that you do, especially as such a young person, and what has helped you learn along the way?
I think it's a big part of that is how hard you work, because it's concerns that I used to have too, being like, I'm so young, I'm going into this industry, like what would these guys like listen to me? They don't really know me, I haven't played in the NBA before, like if I give them advice on like, I don't know, their form or their footwork out of nowhere, they might look at me and be like, bro, you crazy, or what you talking about? But I think when people see how hard you work, hard work is something that you always have to respect no matter what. If someone is over there just working hard and they're coming up with something and you can tell that it's just like well thought through and that they really put effort into it, it doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to like agree with you 100%, but they actually like at least gonna give you an opportunity they're gonna listen to you at least, and they're gonna respect what you're saying, and then it's their choice to agree or not. Like when I give advice to like a player, or I have a suggestion to like a coach about something, I go up to them and I try to be strategic, and I try to think it through before I just talk, and I'm like, oh, like we should do this or that, but then what they do with it is their choice, and I try to not take any I don't have hard feelings towards, something that I suggest, something that I say, whether they agree with it or not. But I think, one thing is just it's hard work. And I would also say just knowing that, like, for me, and go back to the same thing, is just like, I know because of my journey to get there, how like God wants me there, because there's been just so many signs along like the journey that now that I'm here, I'm confident where I am, and I know that I'm kind of like living like my calling to be there. So like that gives me the confidence to just be able to go up there, get up every day, and just like trust my craft and my hard work. And I think it's something I can always like rely back on whenever I like the doubts start like creeping in a little bit, because it does happen. For sure. But then knowing like, no, like I'm supposed to be here. I know I was called to be here. So like it's something that's like above anybody's like opinion or perspective or anything earthly. Like I know I'm supposed to be here no matter what. So no matter what people say, no matter like how it turns out, like today I might have a horrible day. Like I'm gonna bounce back tomorrow and come back and know that I'm supposed to be here no matter what. So it's like two things that really helped me a lot with that.
Yeah, it's really trusting Christ, right? Of He has brought you to this position, right? And so it's not as much about how much you know or how well you can do. It's about Him guiding you to continue to be successful. And one thing that caught my attention that you were talking about is, sometimes you say something and maybe the coach or the player doesn't fully agree, but at least you said something, right? At least you stepped up and had the courage to share your opinion, share your advice. And if you're not on point, I'm sure they correct you and share their opinion as well. And that teaches you, right? That edifies you. And I think the thing that young people can struggle with, and I can even speak from experience, right, of, working in ministry, you have to be very vocal, right? It's very relational. And sometimes my biggest struggle is just not sharing anything because I'm so afraid of like, well, what if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
What if I don't understand that scripture well enough? But the best things that I've ever done, I've just been able to share and step up and give my thoughts and opinions. And if it's wrong, that correction teaches me and helps me grow. And so I think from your testimony there, like our young people can take that to their work and their positions and apply that. And if they don't feel like they know, they can learn and grow from even just speaking up. So I think that's
absolutely. And I think like one thing about that too is just you have to think about it before you do it, right? I'm not telling everybody to, like when they try and build relationships with people, when they see opportunities that will right away, you just go up and start rah. Yeah, but no, like you have to give it thinking. But once it's like deep thinking and you thought it through for like a little while and you're like, okay, that would make sense. Why would I do this? It would be more strategic to do it now. Yeah. Now your level of discernment went up because you're like, okay, like I know why I'm saying that. And then also the second thing is like, how and when should I say it? Because obviously there's times where like, you should just shut up, right? And there's times where you're able to speak up and there's times where you should speak up. And I think that the more you think about what your point is and the more you try and like give it discernment with like, okay, like I think right now is the right time. If you have that patience to do that in the process, it's never gonna be bad and it's always gonna end up being beneficial. Even if like nobody agrees with you in the room, at least you'll have that credibility and that respect. So it's just a fine line between like having the right discernment of like knowing how and when to do it and not do it,
100%. And that's like a lot of patience and humility, right? To know like, Lord, like, and it's not my job to be the smartest or the best in the room, right? It's my job to do what I'm called to do at the best of my ability with excellence. Right?
Exactly.
And you're not the head coach, right? So it's
exactly.
Like,
yeah.
You got to find your role.
You get exactly what I'm saying. That's the point. Just understanding, having a genuine understanding of what's going on, what's your role within that, and then like thrive into that, and have the courage and confidence of just like it's Christ in you, so it's gonna be okay no matter what, and then just go for it.
Yeah. Absolutely, Jonathan. And I think one thing that is pretty obvious just in hearing you share your story and talk about your time in the league, but there's challenges to working with such a high level organization, and so many young people I think have a desire to work in the NBA or other professional leagues but just don't know what to expect. And so what have been those challenges for you? And maybe you mentioned a few already, and then what advice would you give any of our listeners who have these aspirations to work in a professional league?
I think for me the biggest challenge would be the balance between the personal and professional life. Yeah. It's very, very challenging because you have to sacrifice a lot of time.
100%.
Like it's one of the most time-consuming industries, and so you have to know that going into it. Yeah. And it's definitely, and honestly, might be the biggest and only challenge for me because I love what I do, and I have a pure love for the game, and I'm so thankful for God being so giving me these signs so strongly earlier in my life to just tell me that he wanted me there so that when 100%. It gets hard, I remember that and I'm like at peace no matter what. But the challenge is very time consuming. So and I gave you an example. It's been hard, for example, for my fiance. She's moved here now for a couple of weeks. Yeah. And so we're getting married in July. Super excited about it. And so it's been a whole lot of wedding planning, which that because you're getting married too.
Yes, sir.
But it's challenging, and there's times where she thinks that I might not be like present enough, or I'm not doing enough of the wedding planning, or that my job is more important than her. And so it's all these things where it's just like, it's obviously kind of like lies that the devil trying to like put in her head. But at the same time, it's really things where on my hand, like I have to be very intentional with everything that I do, with the time that I spend doing certain things, because at the end of the day, like, she's more of a priority than my career, although I spend more time doing stuff for my career than with her, because that's how the industry is.
Totally.
But so that it's definitely the biggest challenge, and I'm constantly learning how to navigate that and be better at it. And I'll never be perfect, I don't think, and she has grace on her end too, and forgiveness, because she knows how hard it is. But I would say it's the biggest challenge, and
Absolutely.
and I would also say that it's the one thing that I would tell people that aspire to work in that industry to give it a thought the most, because it's something that will hit you hard once you get into the industry, and it doesn't care about you or how you feel, or like, these games keep coming, these game plans have to come, these games need to be coded, that your body needs to be ready for that workout where you're like defending 3 different guys today on 3 different player development workouts. Like, no matter what, it just at the end of the day doesn't care. Like, it's what you're here for, that's what you're paid for, and so you have to respond, and you have to be there, and you have to do what you're paid to do at a very high level, because it's a very high level industry. So I would say it's just, give it a thought of like, do you have that genuine understanding of what it takes, and are you willing and wanting that? Because if not, it's okay, but you have to know that, because otherwise it could be a little like deceiving. Like, I don't really know, I didn't expect that. You have to know beforehand that it's hard like that. But once you accepted that, and once you're able and like just willing to navigate it, then it's not easy, but it just flows, because you love it, and you have such a, and I mean, it's the challenge, but we're not talking about all the good things that come with it too, right? Like, you're around the greatest minds of the basketball minds, like around the best players. It's just so many also benefits to that. That for me personally outweigh like more like of the challenges, but that's the main thing that I would say to anybody that aspire working in this industry.
Yeah, and it really is a very real challenge, because to your point, the expectations are the expectations. They don't shift and change with your life changing, right? For example, like when you started, you weren't engaged, right?
Exactly.
So there wasn't all this.
You get exactly what I'm saying.
Wedding planning and this pressure, but now there is, right? But that doesn't change what is expected from you, right? From the staff and from your coworkers. And so I think, for our listeners, it's like you almost have to weigh the benefits and the cost, right? I think about Luke chapter 14. Jesus is sharing to a large crowd what it's like to follow him. And he legit says almost the same thing you're saying. He's like, a king doesn't go into battle without first thinking about, is this battle winnable? And if it's not winnable, they go and make a peace treaty. And I'm paraphrasing that, of course, but he's saying, before you follow me, think about what the cost is going to be. Think about the challenges of what this is going to take. And I think it's the same thing when we're walking into working in professional sports or college sports or whatever it is. There's going to be a unique challenge. This isn't a 9 to 5. It's not 40 hours a week, right? And so there's a sacrifice. But to your point as well, if you love it and if you're enjoying what you're doing, you're going to really be blessed, right, with the serving and with the opportunity. But I'm sure it is a challenge as well to find that balance of, this is my work, but this is also my life. And obviously now the responsibility of your fiance and future wife.
And another thing I would say too is just trying to have like think about it in a true understanding of like why you want to do it. Yeah. Because it's an industry that's just going to like demand so much out of you that it's going to come down to like the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th layer under your skin of being like, okay, 100%. Why are you truly doing this? And so like for me, I know that there's 2 things. There's one, like God wants me in this industry to be his light, and he wants me there. And that gives me like all the motivation in the world, even when I don't feel like waking up, when I don't feel like going to bed late because of doing that, when I don't feel like going and play defense for like, I don't know how many like plays straight against NBA guys, and I'm exhausted and I have to make all these edits. Like all that, it comes down to, okay, why? Oh, yeah. Like for him and to be his like, boom, like I want to. And then the second thing is just like the pure love of the game that I have too. Like I love basketball so much for the sport itself, from like a technical, tactical standpoint. I think it's a beautiful sport, but also just for like the effect that it has on communities, on people, on togetherness, on just like, I've experienced it as a player, I've experienced it as a coach. Like I think it's just so beautiful that these things keep me going. But for someone that aspires to that, it's just, just knowing the challenge of that, just the sacrifice as far as like time and how time consuming it is, and also like what's the true reason you want to do that. Because if it's like other things such as like money or the fame or just telling other people I work in the league, like you might be able to work like a couple weeks, couple months, but at some point if that's your true motivation and it's just that, you're gonna run out, you're gonna burn out. It needs to be something that's just more that's deeper, that's gonna help you like sustain a high level of just like hard work and like wanting and just and keep it up like the entire time. So
you definitely have to have a why, right? And something that's motivating you to continue pursuing what you're pursuing. And to your point, right, it's, sports is not about the glitz and the glam of, being in the NBA or being around the players. Never. Like at some point, man, that wears out so fast.
Every time.
And I think that's a great point of wisdom, right, for our young people to understand of, it's cool for a while to be in the Target Center, but after a while, it's just another building. Yeah. Right, it's just another building.
And after a while, you're sitting here before a game looking around Target Center, but like Target Center start like spinning around because you're so freaking tired of like the last 3 nights because you've been watching film all night and you've had to practice and you've had to do all these things and you just got off the plane and we landed at like 2, but you had to be in the office at like 7 or 8. Like all these things is great, but like you say, just at some point it runs out, and it's for everybody. And when you talk even to players, it's the same thing. When you like, we try to help them out as coaches and stuff to have like an outlook on it more than just like I'm a superstar, or, like I'm playing for my next contract, I want my money and stuff. But it's just like after a while, like what do you really play for? And that's really what helps you just like keep going, and then even after that, like achieving big things too. Because if you move for these like kind of like vanities, like you just like walking around like with kind of aimless, you know what I mean? Whereas like where you in it for some deeper things, most of the time your destination is just bigger and further at the end. Yeah. So
absolutely. I think of Colossians 3:23 when Paul writes, he says, "Work for the Lord, not for human masters." And I think that's just a great foundation for people working in sports. That following Christ is if you're working for Christ and you're working as if you're working for Him, you're going to work so much harder than if it was just working for a coach or for whoever.
Absolutely.
I think that's a good perspective as well.
For sure. And it's a great verse to just relate it to. But it's easier said than done, though.
It is.
Because you work in an industry that's just very, like the media is always there on social media. You see it. Everybody you tell that you work in the NBA right away, it looks at you like you're so cool and all these things. And so it's like, it's a constant reminder of being like, man, like, why do I really do this? And so you have to be very intentional in that. Like I say it right now, but it's something that I honestly have to remind myself every day, every single day. Cause it's easy to just feel good about yourself. Like, wow, I'm in the league. Like I'm only 24, like, I'm video coordinator and player development, but it's just like, it's not what it's about. So it's easier said than done, but it's really important for sure.
Yeah. It sure is, Jonathan. And speaking of your why, right, talking about why you're in this industry, I'd love to hear from you after your career is all said and done and you finish your time in the NBA. What kind of legacy do you hope to leave behind?
I think I want to like to leave a legacy of just like someone that that genuinely loved people, that loved people for who they were, and that just wanted to see them succeed, but also did it in the way that was just like constructive to just like lead them to, like ultimately Christ. But I wouldn't necessarily like say that right away to someone in terms of like how I am with them or how I like mentor them or whatever. But it's just, just being love, and leaving that, just that feeling of the fact that I was there, because I love the game and I love being around people and I love just like bringing great energy, and I was willing to put the hard work in, so hopefully I'll leave that behind.
Yeah, absolutely, Jonathan. And I think that's honestly so humbling for all of us to listen to and hear is, your legacy is not wins and losses. It's not that you won a championship, right? It's not that you coach the best player in the NBA. It's about loving people well. And that's exactly what Christ calls us to. You think about the 2 greatest commands, right? The first is love God, right? And the second is love people.
Love people.
Right. And I think that's something we can easily forget.
No, most definitely.
Yeah. But that's an awesome perspective and amazing legacy to leave behind. And Jonathan, lastly, as our listeners continue pursuing Christ in their careers in sports, what advice or encouragement would you provide them as they continue on this journey?
I think I would tell them that to trust Him, trust Him along the way, no matter what season they're in, no matter if they're exactly where they want to be or that they're not. that he has a plan for them, and that as long as they keep doing their part, and then have the ability to surrender to like what happens at the end is the biggest thing for me. Focusing on what they can control, and kind of like it says in Proverbs, right? Like, just don't rely on your own understanding of things, but like trust him, and he'll make your path straight. Just having that ability of like doing everything in your ability that you can to be successful, right? Like every single like inch of just like you like empty the tank every day. It's a part that you can't miss. That it has to be there 100%. But then once you did that, also be in prayer and having the ability to understand, now that I did my part, but no matter what happens, it's going to be, his will and what he wants. And no matter what, it's going to be perfect, because he's a perfect God, right? So like, as long as you do your part, there's really no pressure to have on your end. And the last thing is too, like, just once you understand that, it will like literally give you wings like around to just like do whatever, because all that pressure is off your shoulder. You just have to do your part. But if you're in an industry, for example, that you love, it's not even hard, because you're going to work hard naturally because you love what you do, right?
Absolutely.
And then once you did that, just being like, okay, now I did it, so I just have to surrender to him, and no matter what happens, I'm good. And just that, like saying that right now even like gives me so much peace, because I'm like, I serve a God that where I have to do all I can, but like once it's all said and done, I surrender. It's not me that's like the final like decision. That's the final like, or like the battle's already won, so I'm sitting here just doing the best I can. But at the end of the day, like the pressure's not on me. So I mean, I'm cool.
That's so encouraging. And I think about it as well of surrendering to Christ is the most freeing thing to do, and I think sometimes
the hardest thing too.
And the hardest thing.
That's the crazy. It's the most peaceful. It's the most peace you can experience through it. Man. But it's also the hardest thing, because we're creatures of like, you want control all the time. Yeah. So it's so hard, and it's just it's the hardest thing, but it's also necessary and beautiful. Amen. Yeah, for sure.
Amen. It's so encouraging too to hear that from you, Jonathan. Of that surrender for you has given you peace, right? To know that wherever you end up, if you're working hard for it, it's where God wanted you to be. And I think that is just, man, I think it gives a sense of calm to know that, God is driving the car, right? He's driving, I'm in the passenger seat, and he's got it. He's got it.
And
right?
that would be most definitely my biggest encouragement, because I see a lot of people, whether it's in, no matter what the industry is, like just nowadays, like people that are just so focused on like results, like outcome, destination, and just like put so much on themselves for that, which like you should want a lot out of yourself and like have ambitions, but it should lead you to work hard and do everything you can as much as you can. But then like the real outcome, what comes out at the end, shouldn't put that pressure on you, because when you've done everything, you don't have anything to regret. You just surrender it. And like I say, it's the best feeling. It's the best design that he could make for us. Just do your part, and then don't worry about it. He didn't say, do your part and then do more, and then if you don't get there, well, it's really your fault. Like, it's not like that. Yeah. So it's just very freeing for us, just of like doing your part as much as you can, and then just like, like lift your hands and just be like, all right, now whatever. Yeah.
You take me where you want me to go. That's so well said, Jonathan. And brother, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. And I just want to encourage you, man. Like, I get to see you in action every single day. And it's such an encouragement to me to see the way you walk and the way you love people. So appreciate your time today.
Yeah, appreciate you. It was a pleasure. Anytime, man. It was a pleasure. Thank you. And you're killing it out there, rebounding every time, man. I like it.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you, Jonathan.
All right, man.
If you want to get involved with Uncommon Sports Group and the mission that we are on to help you navigate the sport industry as followers of Christ, apply for our academy on our website at uncommonsg.org. That's uncommonsg.org. Be sure to catch new episodes of the Uncommon Podcast every Thursday at midnight Eastern Time, as well as the full video episodes on our YouTube channel. Until next time, we pray that you will strive to be uncommon by glorifying the name of God in whatever you may do. See you next week.